if you're going to phrase something, it's probably a better idea to phrase it this way. I offer to do educational classes. I encourage people to join their local AORN. I post signs about getting their CNOR. And now most of the people that I work with know that I teach in an MSN program. So I'm slowly trying to be a leader in a staff nurse position and help people understand how to find their voice and use it.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On this episode of First Case, we speak with Dr. Jessica Gruendler, Healthcare Leadership and Advisory Consultant, and Melanie. I'd love to just hear the story as we get ready for this interview today about how you met Jessica and heard about her story of going from leadership back to a staff nurse position, which we're going to hear all about today.
Yeah, I met Jessica at AORN. I went to the AORN conference this year in New Orleans, and another one of our podcast guests, Phyllis Quinlan, fantastic personal coach and career coach. And she was going to be doing coaching sessions at AORN. And I met up with Phyllis the Friday night before the conference started. And then Phyllis was booked with coaching sessions the whole conference. But when she met Jessica, because Jessica went to Phyllis to talk to her and have a coaching session, suddenly my phone's blowing up and Phyllis is saying, "Hey, you've got to meet Jessica. She has a fantastic story. I want you to hear it. It would be a great episode for the podcast. You've got to meet." And so I connected with Jessica and we met. We sat at one of the tables on the far end of the expo and sat and talked for probably, at least an hour. And she told me her story. We talked about just what she'd gone through, her experiences, and why it led her to do all the things she's going to tell us about in the interview. But she was just so great to talk to. And I'm like, yeah, we have to talk to her. We have to hear this on the show. She was super excited about First Case and getting to tell her story. So I'm really excited to have her here today.
It must have been so nice for everybody to be back in person and seeing each other. I just love hearing that face-to-face engagement story. Boy, is that nice. All right, we're going to be right back with Dr. Jessica Gruendler after a short break.
Hi, I'm Paul Wafer.
I'm Melanie Perry.
And I'm Justin Poulin.
A 17 Studios production, you're listening to First Case.
Joining us now is Dr. Jessica Gruendler, Healthcare Leadership and Advisory Consultant, and we are going to be talking about how we can demystify this challenge of OR staff satisfaction, and no more trying times than the ones we've been living through recently. So I think this is a very timely topic. Really appreciate you coming on the show, Dr. Gruendler.
Thank you very much.
Let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about your background and your experience as we talk about OR staff satisfaction. What led you to doing this work today?
Well, absolutely, and it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. I have recently, after 20 years, returned to the bedside as an operating room staff nurse after 20 years in leadership. My career started in 1980 as a surgical technologist. I advanced through my associate degree and my bachelor's degree, and running down a cement hall after climbing out from underneath the Jackson table one day, I decided I was not going to be able to do this all of my life. So I went back to school to get my master's degree. And at the same time, nursing informatics became popular and up and coming career path for nurses. So I was able to implement a system for the hospital that I worked at and move into the corporate world for 10 years and then go back to the operating room as a director of surgical services. I did that for about 10 years on and off, getting my doctorate at the same time. And I love being in the operating room and I love nursing leadership. But one day I just said, I'm done and I want to be a staff nurse. So that's what I'm doing today.
Okay, so the obvious question then, going from leadership, from being in a role as an OR director and perioperative services director, going back to that staffing role, what's that experience been like?
It's been as amazing as I hoped it would. For the last 12 years, if I've had a bad day in leadership, I would come home and I would tell my husband, I wish I could just go to work and scrub and circulate a case. I wish I could just go stay in the operating room all day. And there are some days as a leader, I put on scrubs and would go do that. And people would just stand and stare at me because they'd never seen their director in the operating room before. And one day I pulled the trigger and I've been amazed that I'm probably in better shape now than I was in my late 30s because I haven't been exhausted. I haven't hurt myself. I've had an amazing training program. I was given 6 weeks to get back to learning how to be a staff nurse. And I really didn't find it much different than when I left 25 years ago. And it's just been an amazing experience. And every day I come home and say, I am so glad I did this.
So let's go a little bit deeper. What was it that really just pushed you to that final where you're like, yeah, I just want to go back to circulating and I want to be a staff nurse? Can you talk a little bit about what pushed you to that?
Well, I don't believe it matters which organization that you work for. I believe as a director of surgical services, you're always faced with budget issues, productivity issues, supply chain issues. And I've become aware recently of a term that I had not heard before called moral injury, where you constantly get hit with things that you're being asked to do or expected to do or do that you really don't agree with and really don't fit your moral fiber. And that was it. It was asking people to stay home during COVID when I needed them there to do stuff long term, having supplies that they were trying to cut because of the cost, telling surgeons that they wanted them to try other things, just things that just constantly the barrage of fix this, shrink this, do more with less, ask more of the staff. I just couldn't do it anymore. I chose not to do it anymore.
Well, that leads me to a pretty good question in following up, because I want to know what that transition has been like for you, especially considering the fact that, yes, there's always the grass is always greener. Whatever I'm not doing seems to be more appealing in times of stress. But it doesn't sound to me like that's why you made that decision. But, you did say that you felt like there was a lot of stress on, the staff nurses. And so then you go and join the staff nurses and dealing with that stress. So have you found it to be more or less stressful or just different? How has that transition gone? Because I can see where you go from feeling responsible for all of that moral, conundrum that you're in, to being on the receiving end of the moral conundrum and not being able to impact the change. How has that gone for you?
I absolutely have no stress in my work life. I go to work at 7. I leave at 3:30. Nobody calls me unless I'm on call. I think the operating room is much different than other areas where there's not a patient acuity question. There's one circulator and one scrub in every room. Whether I get a break or not doesn't matter to me. I know I'm going home at 3:30, and it really hasn't been an issue, which is what really annoys a lot of staff people if they don't get breaks and get lunches. I hear the things that stress out the staff, and they're not things that bother me. So what I've been trying to do is, in a collaborative way, try and address things that are stressing them out, either to help them understand that one, these are things you have no control over. So you're really just creating more stress, or help them understand what's going on in the back that they don't know about, to help the management where I now work with the issues that they're having.
So, I'll tell you, this has come up many times especially in our earlier podcast, but this whole concept of leadership and the cognitive distortion that leadership is a positional thing or a title related thing. And what I just heard you talk about was, leading amongst the group. And just because you're not carrying that title anymore doesn't mean that you can't be a leader, in that role. And I always try to encourage people to do that. One of my most least favorite, I guess you can say that. One of my most least favorite sayings is that's above my pay grade. I hear that all the time. And, I actually, on the one hand, it bothers me because it means somewhat to me, I just don't want to put in the effort, is one thing I hear in that. But there is another part of it that I think is lesser talked about, and it's not necessarily something that people think about all the time, but it also is self-demeaning. I'm not capable of that. I couldn't do that. And I don't think that part of it gets acknowledged from a positional leadership standpoint. That's what people hear a lot, but it is actually somewhat undermining of the self, isn't it?
It is. And I think people don't understand what they can bring to the table. And I think that they have been taught somehow, and this may be a female thing, taught to not speak up, and that if you do speak up, you're going to be ignored. Because it's taken me a long time to change my communication style from being a staff nurse for 10 years and moving into a director role and understanding that different communication style, and then going back to being a staff nurse and having to I listen now more as a staff nurse than I probably did as a leader. I ask for opportunities to, do you want me to do some environmental rounds for you if I finish my case at 2:00? When you do a staff meeting, stop saying we're doing this because the Joint Commission is coming. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. If you're going to phrase something, it's probably a better idea to phrase it this way. I offer to do educational classes. I encourage people to join their local AORN. I post signs about getting their CNOR. And now most of the people that I work with know that I teach in an MSN program. So I'm slowly trying to be a leader in a staff nurse position and help people understand how to find their voice and use it.
Okay, I have a question coming from another staff nurse to a staff nurse. Do you think the staff that you work with feel like you're on their side compared to maybe being somebody almost like that's supposed to be there as the eyes and ears, I guess, of management to sit there and then let management know what's going on? Or do they feel like that there's a camaraderie with you with the position that you've kind of created for yourself in your department?
I believe it's a camaraderie relationship. The first month or two I was there, nobody knew who I was or where I came from. And then I went over to the ambulatory surgery center to orient, and the anesthesiologists from there worked at my other hospital. And they're like, what are you doing here? And then people are like, what is she doing here? And a couple of the surgeons would have asked me literally, where did you come from? You have a different attitude than the people here. And at first I got a lot of pushback when I'd say things like, I'd walk over and I'd turn the radio off when I was counting, or I'd turn the radio off during a timeout, or I'd turn the radio down because I couldn't hear what was going on in the room. Somebody threw 4x4, non-Raytech 4x4s on a mail stand one time when we hadn't finished the case. And I'm like, what are you doing? Get those up the mail stand. He's like, relax. I'm like,
no.
Don't tell me to relax. We're going to do this the
exactly.
right way. And today, a perfect example, the anesthesiologist was talking to my surgical tech about his daughter when we started closing. I said, can we halt the conversation about the family till we finish counting, and then you guys can pick it up again? And so they're beginning to see that I'm on their side, but there are certain things in place that I just hold sacred as far as patient care, and I'm not compromising on those.
Well, I think that's fantastic. And I really think I can only see how it can help other circulators and scrub techs maybe feel empowered that, oh, I don't have to be walked all over by whoever else is in the room. I can tell them to stop talking while we need to count. I can get their attention for the timeout. Oh, it's okay to turn that stupid radio off. And so I can hear while we're doing important parts of the case. And I can only see it being helpful just seeing somebody else do it. And then suddenly it gives somebody else that, oh, I can do this too. And it's okay. And so anyway, I'm impressed by that very much. The other thing that I want to know though is I've also been an OR manager. And anytime I walked into the break room, it got pretty quiet. I mean, people, unless they were mad and coming to like complain to me in my office about something, I didn't hear a whole lot, but you sure do hear a lot when you're sitting at the table in the break room at lunch and people are just chit-chatting and talking and venting and they feel like it's safe to open up. So you've got that position now where you can sit in the break room at lunch or sit there, in between cases if you have some downtime and you can just listen. So I want to know what you're hearing. What is it that people are talking about?
One of the things that really surprised me, and it shouldn't surprise me because it's change management. And what really annoys staff are the little changes that happen constantly. You changed my room. You changed the staff in my room. You changed my schedule. You changed the supplies. Whether it's going from 1,000 cc bottle of normal saline to a 500 cc bottle because there's something stuck on a ship out in the middle of Bethesda, Maryland or something. Changing routines. Just putting a new pathology log where there wasn't one. Little changes, but they happen all the time. And it's just like somebody tapping on your head that, it just drives you crazy. And so that's what I hear is these little changes that make no sense to people are just what kind of stresses them over and over and over and over again. What I try and communicate is to see if you can minimize the stress that these people are already under. I don't know what they're going through in their personal lives, but at work, they want to make the doctors happy. They want to work as a team and they want to provide good patient care. So get rid of the noise so they can do that.
So we did an interview, and I think one of the things that we talked about with this one individual was really about just getting out there and showing face as a manager. And I think they were a system-wide director, right? Oh, that's right. I remember you brought it up when we spoke before. And I remember that just resonated for you when we talked, was that, going around and really just listening and checking in, even though there's so many different people that you need to hear. I wonder, now that you're back in working as a staff nurse, as we tie this to, OR staff satisfaction, what drives that? What have you learned now that you've been able to spend time, because in a leadership position, you spend some time, but it's hard to really immerse yourself. What have you learned that maybe you didn't really realize when you were in a management position that has given you some insight into what truly drives staff satisfaction?
There's a couple things that I think directors and leadership could really do to drive staff satisfaction. The first thing is to have someone dedicated to updating your preference cards. Accurate preference cards get placed on the back burner as a cost initiative or this is what we should do, but it's critical. It's critical to have an updated preference card to be able to do a case, even if you do it over and over again, because someone is going to change something at some point, and you want to know about it if you haven't been in that room for a week. And on top of that, holding people accountable for complete case cards and picking cases accurately, because the last thing you want to know at 7:15 in the morning is whoever picked your case didn't pick everything on the preference card that you just spent time updating. And then along with that, having working equipment and knowing where that equipment is to use. And those are just I mean, those are three basic things that are all combined, and it takes a huge effort, but you have to know and you have to be able to fight for your staff and support having someone in that full-time job to make sure preference cards are accurate and make sure case cards are complete.
I 100% agree. I'm sitting here like thinking I could pick up some pom-poms and cheer like, yes, this would be so much better. It would make, I mean, it's almost, on one side, it feels like you're writing a Christmas list of what would just be perfect to have if you could, but then you think about it and you're like, no, but this would be, and it would make.
It's not hard. It's not hard.
It's not hard, but it takes commitment, and it takes prioritizing staff for things that sometimes get seen as non-productive, I guess, for lack of a better term. But it's not non-productive when you think about it, because I can have somebody dedicated to fixing prep cards, or I can have all of my staff on all of my teams running their tails off because they don't have what they need, and then our cases are delayed, and then we're suddenly working late. And that whole trickle-down effect of when I don't have somebody dedicated to this, or when I don't have somebody who is set aside to just guarantee that those case cards are correct. Or if we don't have it, I don't know, a standard in place maybe that doesn't tolerate them not being correct. We don't just, we'll fix it later. No, we need to fix it now. And then suddenly the efficiency and productivity and all those things that we've talked about with other episodes, they come together because it's actually putting, I guess, literally putting your money where your mouth is. It's that, let's make this work better. Let's make it efficient like we want it to. All right. So obviously I'm championing all of these three that we just talked about, but I'm sure you have more. So what else do you have? But I'm sure that there are other solutions as well. So what other solutions do you have to offer?
One of the things that has jumped out to me is with the daily safety huddles at the beginning of the shift, those have become the norm in most settings in the OR. What I would do to increase staff satisfaction and efficiency is to have an end of shift huddle with at least one representative from each OR or each service line to review opportunities for improvement that day. So was the patient ready? Was the case cart ready? Were there staffing inconsistencies? Should we room swap? Should we not room swap? What today kept you from being efficient? What today kept you from taking care of your patient? And then you know at the end of the day what you might be able to eliminate tomorrow. And I haven't ever heard that mentioned, an end of shift huddle. I know there's handoff when you're talking about patient to patient and even charge nurse to charge nurse, but I think the way we come together every morning and talk about the day, I think we should do that at the end of the shift. I think it's worth 10, 15 minutes before people go home to say, you know, my day would have really been easier if I would have had all the vendor trays here to check them the day before surgery. If I would have had all of the urology stents I needed so I didn't have to go running after things during this case. Or the patients that were in pre-op today, none of them had their dentures removed, their glasses off, their jewelry off. Just, what could we do to increase the efficiency?
I have so many things to say about that. That is that post-shift huddle. I can tell you when I used to work in psych nursing, whenever we had to apply a hold or a physical restraint, that after that, once there was a safe milieu again or a safe environment, then we would all come back together and talk about how that escalated, why it got to needing physical restraint, what we could have done better. I think the key about that more than anything was for our own growth, that we needed to talk about it while it was relevant. And one of the things, now stepping aside and really talking about this post, shift huddle, one of the things that will happen is you start having these meetings on a larger scale, and you either over meet when things aren't relevant and then ask staff, what do you think we can do? And it's just not in the moment. It doesn't always come to mind. But the other thing that will happen is because it's not relevant, you don't necessarily get everybody on the same page about the particulars. And so it becomes kind of this general consensus of an issue without the type of specifics that would drive a resolution. And so that then becomes this culture of, you know how it is here. It's always this way, which doesn't give anybody then the freedom to make the necessary changes either, because now they've decided it's the way it is and they don't want to speak up, and it's a muted environment. And that's what really, I think, makes it so difficult. So I love this post-shift huddle concept, because I think leadership would get the best information. Hey, when we all came together at the beginning of the day, this is what we talked about, how we were going to make the day go. And then at the end of the day, this is how it actually went. What did we think we needed to do that we didn't need to do? What did we not think about that we probably should have done? And then day by day by day, you chip away at those little things that corrode organizational culture. I love that.
I just think it's a great idea. I haven't talked to the leadership there yet. I'm prioritizing my bucket list.
I have a question about the logistics of it, though, because when we have morning huddle, everybody, no matter if they work an 8, a 10, or a 12, everybody's there generally at 7 or 6:30, and you can have your huddle and get everybody. But when people are filtering off of their shift, I mean, if you plan a time for a huddle, would you do it at the end of every shift and have somebody lead that huddle based on the shift time so that you would catch it from every shift and catch, or would it only be maybe after the 8-hour shift people? What's the best way to do that?
I think it depends on your staff. Most of the staff where I work 8 hours. Well, everybody works 8 hours. Some people work 10, but most people work 8. So I think if people go home, whether you work from 6:30 to 3 or 7 to 3:30, if you if you could let people out of your room for 10 minutes and then meet for 10 minutes and then give people 10 minutes to get ready to go home, I think after at least your first 8-hour shift, and then if there was an assistant manager or somebody there at the end of the evening, whether it was a 7 o'clock or an 11 o'clock shift, or just somebody can say, hey, just talk to one person that was in charge during that evening shift. And it really depends on how many rooms you run at night. We don't run that many. So
yeah, with my own experience with it, and what I was responsible for when I was team leader was that was kind of my job, was to go back and kind of filter through all of the complaints that I would get and then submit them on up to the director. But people don't always remember. They don't always know. And then it was never immediate. And I was just thinking, you know, if we had done it that way, where we kind of rounded up before we went home, hey, what happened now? What happened today? And let me get it submitted today. I think it would have gone a long way to make sure that, like Justin said, we didn't forget. Or that people would feel like their voice was actually heard because they remembered it, they reported it, and they knew that it was getting sent on where it needed to go. I can just see a lot of benefit to it, no matter how is, you know, when you're pulling in all those different shifts, but however you coordinate it, getting that info on in a timely manner, I think is the phrase that we want to say.
And that somebody cares enough to ask you the question, what could have gone better for you today?
Right. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you, this interview just flew right by. What I love about it, you did a nice job of keeping it real to the point. Like, anybody who listens to this episode is just going to have some real concrete takeaways, and they're going to relate very much to this conversation. And again, as we said at the very beginning, I think it's really relevant for the environment that we're all working in right now. And honestly, that this could go beyond OR staff satisfaction. This could be staff satisfaction in any industry. And it's just about having that communication and having everybody given an opportunity to be able to voice concerns and where everybody might be able to do better. And sometimes, you know, you might have that debrief and say, there's nothing we could have done about it. It's just what happened. And at least in that case, you can kind of validate, hey, we had a crappy day. And, you know, maybe there was nothing we could have done about it. But even that acknowledgement at the end of a crappy day, see, you're all smiling. But that is how people go home instead of going home with their head down and frustrated, this acknowledgement that the day just got away from us. And no matter how much planning we might have done today, the outcome may have been the same. And that acknowledgement and putting a few smiles and hey, we want to do better, but sometimes the deck is stacked against us, is a healthy thing for people to wrap up their day with. So I'm going to say, as we wrap up the day or wrap up the interview, like, what other advice would you give, or just some general final thoughts for staff or leaders that you think might be really important? You know, let's not walk away and go home at the end of the day without really saying everything that needed to be said.
So, Melanie, you wanted to ask me about my hashtag.
I did, and I didn't. This interview went by so fast. I never got a chance.
We
I
can
didn't
do
realize
it really quick, and that can end it on a really good note.
as we have talked and emailed, and after I got to know you from AORN, I noticed this hashtag that you use on LinkedIn, and I've seen it in the emails that you sent to me. It's hashtag not just the nurse. And I'm curious what motivated you to create that hashtag or start using it, and what it means.
I was at an AOR and leadership conference years ago in San Diego, and there was a student of mine who had transitioned from a surgical tech into a nursing program and was in a BSN program. And there was a room full of leaders, management, and directors. And he stood up and introduced myself, and he said, "My name is David, and I'm just a nurse." And when the room came around to me to introduce myself, I said, "David, let me just say, I know what your career is, and you are not just a nurse." And I didn't realize at the time that if anybody remembers the Miss America pageant in, I believe, 2017, where Kelly Johnson walked on stage in a pair of scrubs and a stethoscope and told a story about her patient who had asked her for things and asked her for things and asked her for things. And every time he asked her a question, she'd say, "But I'm just a nurse." And the last time she took care of him, he said, "Kelly, you're not just a nurse, you're my nurse." So I just try, especially in this role, I may be a staff nurse, but I'm not just a nurse. And there's things all of us can do to be leaders every day.
Fantastic. Well, that is a great way to wrap up an excellent interview. I can't tell you how much we appreciated you having on. And I can tell you there were just so many very poignant takeaways that were laid out throughout this episode that I just know it's going to be very beneficial to everybody out there listening. And, you know, you're very active, as Melanie said, on LinkedIn. And I think we always want to encourage more and more collaboration and networking. We've been so isolated for quite some time now. This is a great way, other than our day-to-day, the ability to meet with each other and collaborate and network, and even AORN meetings in person and all of that. You know, I just want to encourage everybody, if somebody's active on social media, it's because they want to be approached. They want to engage and talk with you and share their insights. And so if anybody out there is just sort of hesitating and whatnot, I say go for it, and they can find you there. And I just want to thank you so much for being willing to share, you know, your thoughts and your experience today.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
That was Dr. Jessica Gruendler, and we were talking about OR staff satisfaction. Melanie, what I really loved about this interview is not only were they key takeaways for driving staff satisfaction, plus a few creative ideas, they're also very doable. There was nothing in there where I think somebody would be listening to this episode and say, "Oh, that just sounds so daunting," or "There's just no way we could do that where I work." And so that happens a lot. We get great advice, but I know sometimes people hear what others have done and they think, wow, that really takes a special skill set to pull that one off. And this does take a special skill set to pull off, but at the same time, they're very doable. The skill set is committing to the culture and the way that you put it together. So anyway, I'm glad that we're able to share this content, but also not just a nurse and the hashtag. If we can help get that more and more promoted, I think that would be great.
Yeah, no, I totally love it. It's a pet peeve, I think, when I hear people refer to themselves as just a nurse. And I never really thought about making it a hashtag before, but it's definitely a good idea. But to follow on to what you said, the takeaways, yeah, they were actionable, but they were also coming from somebody who actually worked in the OR, instead of getting these ideas from on high that sound like somebody made them up from an office somewhere and they haven't actually worked in an OR to know what would work and what wouldn't. And so not only do you have something that's doable, but it's actually relevant to our space because it's coming from an expert in the space. And it's like, yeah, I can do that. I can see where that's important. And so it's easy to get behind to see the value in it.
Especially with that unique perspective, growing the career and then going back after having that leadership perspective, but seeing it from the staff nurse, experience again and perspective again. It really brings it full circle so that it's relevant from both sort of angles. And I think that is just what makes this episode so unique. So that's going to do it for this week's show. As a reminder, you can help support First Case by subscribing on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts. We're also available on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or you can just search for First Case on your favorite podcast application. For some of our episodes, we have bonus content, but you've got to download the smartphone app for iPhone and Android. And while you're there on the App Store, we'd appreciate a rating and a review because your feedback's important to the show. On behalf of Melanie and myself, thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case.